Okay, so let's start.
Okay, let's start. I'll start by putting you on the spot and asking you whether you think Democritus made a great contribution to philosophy.
I think my answer is yes. Okay, he did a great contribution. Well, not so great. Let's put it this way. More important is, well, probably I follow Bertrand Russell's view. Uh, it it's less on democratic making progress, more on Plato and Aristotle making backward movement, especially on the scientific movement. That's that's what Bertrand Russell's view, and which I kind of agree. Okay, so that's pretty straight.
Sure, you can make that case.
And Bertrand Russell used the interest word. He talking about uh Plato, okay, the rejection of the world of sense in favor of the self-created world of pure thought. And Aristotle, the belief in purpose as the fundamental concept in science. These two persons make backward movement uh, on the scientific development in the Western world.
Yeah, that's a very interesting position. And I
And
would
the
have
other
to,
thing is, uh, I think the Democrats make a foundation for Epicurus thought. So I do see a lot of his ethic, uh, or you want to call it life philosophy, okay, which become the foundation of Epicurus.
of course, you would definitely approve of that, being a hedonist yourself. Was that on your mind, that you think it was
No,
great
I think
progress because
nothing
it
personal.
made progress for Epicurus's ethics?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it's related to my personal belief, but I do. Is anybody from the secondary source talk about he and Epicurus? Should I say
No, but
similar?
I already was going to make that connection because I've read Epicurus and I already know that there's a very strong
Okay,
connection. So we're together on that. But as far as Bertrand Russell's analysis, I disagree strongly. I do think that Plato went in a different direction than the one of scientific empiricism. However, that was a very important direction to take. You know me. I'm talking about the thing that I like about philosophy is that it separates into different schools, and each school has something important that it does. So Plato did, if you want to look at him as what did he do for science, you can argue not much. But what did he do for philosophy in general? A whole lot. And as for Aristotle, um, I'm going to argue that Aristotle's view about purpose wasn't a terrible mistake. It was a logical insight that he had because he was very aware that acorns turn into oak trees. And Democritus does not give a satisfactory answer about how this can occur. So Aristotle was right to challenge Democritus. As long as we have trees growing into, seeds growing into large trees, we have to reject Democritus's atomism as a complete theory of the world. Only with Darwin were we able to resolve the conflict. Anyway, that's my view.
okay, but that's a bit fail because I think the Democritus writing is only fragment survived. So the comparison probably not fair in this way, because another thing we don't
You
know.
think that Democritus was actually, if only we had his complete works, he'd be giving us theories of how acorns turn into oak trees and
No, no,
Darwin's theory of evolution and
no,
everything that
no.
we
I'm
know in
talking
modern
about.
times?
I'm talking about. One thing I'm more interested. I try to connect his scientific theory and his political theory and his metaphysics. Okay, something like this. I think he does touch this area, but since we don't have enough writing left, so we are not sure uh, how does this field connected to each other. So his philosophy seems not comprehensive like Plato or Aristotle. That's my view.
Okay, well, let's start reading.
Okay.
In
Let
all
me.
probability, credit for the fundamental ideas of the atomic theory, Greek speculation's greatest achievement, should go to Leucippus of Miletus rather than to his pupil Democritus. But we know almost nothing of Leucippus.
Probably want to continue on this one.
No,
No, okay.
it's
So
a
go
great
ahead.
paragraph.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm glad that McGill brought in Leucippus because scholar in the history of ideas, scholars are very interested in Leucippus and how much he contributed to the theory. And we can learn a lot about Democritus by looking at Leucippus. We also like the idea here that this is Greek speculation's greatest achievement. And I would say that it is a great achievement, even though I was critical of the fact that Democritus doesn't talk about oak trees. That doesn't mean I don't believe that Democritus made a great achievement in his theory, but I'm going to argue, for different reasons. And I just want to mention Miletus.
Mm-hmm.
Leucippus of Miletus. Now, where have we seen that before? So Leucippus is considered to have been born in Miletus, and he was chased out of Miletus by the Persians and lived, according to scholars and according to the reports at the time, he lived in Alia for a while. He lived in Miletus and he lived in Abdera. Well, you know how interested I am in regions and how much they influence people. And one way of looking at Democritus is seeing how these three different regions affected him in different ways. So that's all I have to say about that at this time.
Yeah, so Leucippus escape Persian invasion and they go to the north, and then that's why democratics can study with him in the Abdera. Am I right?
Abdera was
Abdera at the north, yeah, on the north of the.
Abdera was a colony that was created by the Ionians who were fleeing Asia Minor. They came over to, as you say, northern Greece, but keep in mind that it's not in a rural area. It was a port city, just like
It's a okay. It's a port city.
it's a
Okay, so
port city, and it was a thriving city, and it's the home of a lot of great philosophers. So add that to the list of
who,
intellectual center.
I just try
Okay,
to think
first of
about
all,
who.
Democritus was Protagoras' teacher, and
Oh, he's a Protagoras teacher.
he was Protagoras' teacher. Another important scientific brain from that area was Hecataeus, great cartographer, which is not just at that time what involved a lot more than simply taking notes about where things existed. It also had to do
Okay.
with
So,
speculation about how the world looked. So anyway, there's a bunch of people from that area.
okay, Pythagoras is also from Abedora.
Yes,
Okay, so I just know this name are familiar, but I just cannot think about who else. I thought the Mino, but actually it's not. But
there are plenty of people in the
and
area.
who else? Who else? Can you recall?
Not off the top of my head, but when I read the list, I recognized a lot of the names.
Okay, that's great to know. Yeah, I'm glad that we didn't skip the discussion of this
Yeah.
chapter. Okay, so let's move on.
Okay, rational speculation about the nature of the world began not earlier than the 6th century BC. 4 or 5 generations later, it had progressed in Democritus to an essentially correct account of the nature of matter. This amazing fact has led to both exaggeration and underestimation of the Greek achievement. On the one hand, some people conclude that science stood still until the revival of the atomic theory in the 17th century. On the other, scientists especially are prone to point out that modern atomic physics rests on evidence derived from careful quantitative experimentation, of which the Greeks knew nothing. Therefore, it is said the ancient theory was merely a lucky guess, and the Greeks made all possible guesses. A brief review of the development of early Greek physics will show that while Democritus did not have Dalton's reasons for asserting that the world consists of atoms moving in the void, he nonetheless had some very good ones. Knowing these, we shall be able to compare ancient and modern atomism less superficially and misleadingly.
Okay, that's McGill talking. And then anything you want to say about this one?
Yes, the atomic theory essentially was a logical theory which was not based upon scientific experiment. Instead, it was based on logic and just soft empiricism. And my view about its importance is that it became a model that other great philosophers and scientists were able to use, which came in handy. When Galileo was doing scientific experiments, he found it handy to turn to a theory of primary and secondary qualities, which he derived through Lucretius, who got it through Epicurus, who got it through Democritus. So these atomic theories became a type, I'm going to call it a model that scientists were able to use, which would emphasize the non-God influenced random mechanical activity of the universe. And from then on, scientists were able to do their experiments and eventually use this model as an interpretive scheme so that everything could make sense. Now, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm saying that we shouldn't criticize it for being not based on scientific evidence, because most paradigmatic models are conceptual schemes which should be based more on their utility than whether they were derived from experiment.
Yeah, I got your point. So your point is all uh the the atomic theory are derived from more from logical thinking than from empirical thinking. So
Right.
in this way, you think democratics has a great contribution as the
Yes.
beginning. Okay,
He
so
provided a mechanistic view of the world, which came in really handy. Now, I would say the same thing about Epicurus. You want to emphasize the ethical continuity between Epicurus and Democritus. I want to emphasize Epicurus's metaphysics because and say that his ethics was based on a metaphysics of mechanism. And so once again, Epicurus looked around at the different models and decided, well, this is a handy model for my ethics, and therefore I'm going to use this model and develop a complete philosophy based on it.
I do have a, I would not say I agree or disagree with you, but basically I probably look at democratics in a different view. I do see he is a radical rationalist. Okay, so he want to do, and then when we start to see his, I think in the later part of McGill, and also I read his original fragment, there's a lot of strange idea he developed. And I think that all these are based on non-conventional thinking, which is based on his own radical rationalism. In another way, I might call him an early nihilist. Okay, let's put this way. Okay.
Well, sure, that's a logical step to take, especially since we know Protagoras. Protagoras is often
Ah,
accused of nihilism.
yeah, actually, that's a great thing to know is I didn't connect him with Protagoras. Okay, I only remember Abdora, this name I read before, and it must be some famous people. And I check, and I look like I go to the wrong direction. I check the people, celebrity in Plato's dialogue, and I check the Meno. I check uh, most of the people are from Italian side, not from Ionian side. Okay,
Right.
and then I didn't notice Abdora is from not Abdora. The Protagoras is from Abdora.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Let's
let's
move
move
on.
on.
The men of Miletus, especially Anaximander, who made the break with mythological world accounts in the early 6th century BC, took over from previous creation myths two important assumptions. First, these Milesians accepted the belief that there was a creation, or rather a development. The world was not always as it is now, but had in the beginning been something simple and homogeneous, like the chaos of the myths. Differentiation, complexity, and organization have a history. Second, the Milesians accepted the theory that there exists an impersonal force making for order and justice in the universe at large. The Milesians were the first philosophers because they dispensed altogether with the will of the gods as an explanatory principle, because they assumed that the natural forces that made the universe what it is were of a kind still operative. The problem, as they conceived it, was to identify the original simple world stuff out of which all things had come, and to describe the process which had differentiated and organized it into the present world. Not divine inspiration, but ordinary human reason, they thought, was capable of solving the problem. And since the conclusion based on reasons invite criticism and modification, unlike revelations, which can be only accepted and rejected, the history of rational speculation was progressive.
I think we already talked about this, right? Do you have anything to add on?
Well, I just want to,
Oh,
I
from the
just want to,
previous section, yeah.
what?
Yeah, we already go through all the Malaysian philosopher, okay, for
Yeah.
the previous uh last few weeks. We already gone through all these philosophers.
Well, I agree. And the first 2 or 3 pages of this McGill summary
Yeah,
are a review
review.
of what
Yeah.
we've already gone over. But I still want to make mention occasionally of a point that I think is important. And I like the way he describes the kind of rational scientific inquiry as being incremental. The fact that when one person makes some sort of speculation, which is based on reasons, that other people can come back and critique it, and that we can't have as much progress if the world is described in terms of divine fiat.
Yeah, I agree. But another thing I'd like to mention is the concept of universe is created and continuously developing. I think that's the concept in general in Ionian or Malaysian philosopher. And another thing I also interested is
Yeah,
the
that's a great
concept.
point. Mhm.
Another important thing is the concept of justice. It sounds like on the Italian side, I'm not sure, you probably can correct me. Do they develop the concept of justice?
I don't know.
Look like
I heard
the
justice mentioned in this summary, and I know justice is really important to the Greeks. And I'm not, sure what region it evolved out of.
I kind of start to think about the people on I talk about ancient time in the Italian side. Probably they are more divine thinking. So
That's your argument, that they're more
yeah, and
mystical,
then the
religion.
concept of justice probably not. Well, if they do have a
That's a
concept of
great
justice,
point. I think you might have something there.
probably means pious, right? Something please God. Okay, the God will be happy. So they have
Right.
audience who is God. We are performing, and the God see that's great. Okay, that's justice. And then the concept of just on the Malaysian side could be different because they are more scientific. The concept justice means the natural force, or it should be this way. Just
Of
like
course,
when you
exactly.
drop a rock, it should drop to the ground. Okay, so I think they have this kind of concept. Okay, so even they may share the same word, but their concept, uh, the connotation could be different.
Great point. I love it. Yeah. Okay, let's go on.
Okay.
In addition to the ideas of ultimate oneness, development, and justice inherited from religion, the earliest philosophers assumed with common sense that nothing can come out of nothing or be absolutely destroyed, and that our senses reveal to us directly the constituents of the world, at least as it is now. We feel heat and cold. We taste sweetness and bitterness. We see red and green. Heat, cold, sweetness, bitterness, red, and green are therefore parts of the objective world. Together they make it up. We should say that they are qualities of matter, but early Greek thought does not make this distinction. The hot, the cold, the wet, the dry, and so on in various combinations are the stuff of things. One must simply find out the unity underlying this diversity.
Uh, Okay, so I think here we repeat the same concept, talking about the quality and the things, okay, or matter, okay, or McGill argued in ancient Greek, there's no separation of hot as a quality versus the hotness, okay, which is the hot things. I think that's this paragraph want to say.
Right, and we've gone over that plenty,
We
which is
gone over there, and then we do have some small disagreement on that, but I think we will go over later.
I thought that I convinced you last week.
Well, I thought
That you were arguing that Empedocles was a great
we go back there. We go back there.
Okay,
So okay.
all right.
So I think that
I can't believe you've returned to your earlier position because
okay. Let me come back with
okay,
you.
well, we'll get to that in later paragraphs. But
Yeah.
let me just say, make a comment about this notion that something can't come from nothing,
Okay.
which is primary. It may be the most important logical principle of all of Greek philosophy. Something can't come from nothing. In other words, it's the law of eventually, as Leibniz describes it, the law of sufficient causation, which is that you can't have an event occur without an equal cause. And this notion, according to this paragraph, came to the Greeks not through reason, but it was kind of just a premise that they all agreed to take that was based on common sense. And it's important to realize, I think, that when you are developing models and methodologies, you can't prove everything. You have to start somewhere with some assumptions. This turned out to be a gigantic assumption, which was so helpful in developing science and philosophy, I believe.
I agree with you, but let me ask another question. Why this one become a common sense, become a common belief, right? That's a big
Common
question.
belief. Everyone just assumed it.
Yeah, why? Right? That's a
They
big
say
question.
because of common sense.
Because in
They
Hindu,
said that's what McGill says. They said they came out of common sense.
I know, but I just
I don't understand it. It's a mystery to me. Why didn't other cultures have the same obsession with something can't come
no,
from
they
nothing?
don't. They don't. Chinese don't see this way, and the Indian don't see this way. Okay, so that's why
I think it makes Greek culture unique myself. If you want to ask, if I'd say, if you want to ask, how did philosophy come to the Greeks? It came out of this common sense assumption that they made.
I kind of think about other way. That's assume because I at least I do see a lot of connection between Hinduism, okay, the Indian and the Greek thinking, okay, in the
Well,
early,
me too.
okay. So
Because both the Indians, the Hindus, and the Greeks believed that there were two levels of reality. There was a illusion, which is based on our senses, and there was an underlying substance underneath. And that
yeah,
kind of split isn't common in the world.
yeah. So
Very similar.
I think that's because Greek are not happy with this kind of situation or two kind of reality. So that's why they want to make sure, okay, they believe something cannot come from nothing, okay, as their basic belief. Just like when Judaism start to think in the God, they want to go against this fundamental belief, okay, uh, uh, create from nothing, okay. So I think that's how human. Let's put it this way. Who said this? I believe it's Nietzsche. He said, look at the law, okay, in the country. It doesn't represent the mores of this country. It represents what kind of convention they don't like in their neighboring country. Okay, so your neighboring country drinking a lot of wine, then you will make a law say no drinking. Okay, so let's put this way: if Greek want to be different from Hindus, okay, so they have to have this kind of thinking. That's kind of uh
Well, you know my theory that cultures arise Uh-oh. Take a break for a second.
Okay, let's continue.
My theory is that every culture experiences a niche, which is a hole that they can fill by strengthening that part of their beliefs. So it's a way of finding integrity and power to develop a specialization of some type. So my theory doesn't contradict yours.
I know.
In fact, it might be identical.
Yeah, I think it could be the same. It could be the same. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on.
Except that I'd say the biggest difference is that the Indians had more of a tendency towards otherworldly experience than the Greeks.
That's true.
And that may
Okay.
have something to do with the Greek experience as merchants on a port city in the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
You
and
tend to be
that's another
otherworldly when you
that's
live on the
another
beach.
yeah, and then because their life are more dynamic. Okay. So uh they if they look at their forefather, okay, they will find out their life is very different than their grandfather or great grandfather. So the life is different, and then they are more they will be more adventurous. Let's put it this way. Another thing to compare is
Yeah.
far away in China. Uh, the life is more stable. Okay, so stability is the concern. That's why we start to develop the instead of justice, more on the harmony. Okay, more on the stability. That become the highest word because when they look at their great father, a great father or their a grandfather or their forefather, they will find out we all live in the same life. So why not continue in this way? So so-called justice or the ultimate good is whatever your forefather did, you know. So I think that would be very
Excellent. I
yeah.
love it.
Okay, so let's move on.
Okay.
Oh, hold on. Do you see the screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Thus, for example, Anaximenes, the third of the Milesian physicists, held that the fundamental stuff is mist. Everything is really mist. The things that do not appear to be mist are mist that has been thickened or thin. Very thin mist is fire. Mist somewhat thickened is water. Thickened still more, it is stone.
Okay, I think we all
We
talk
talked
about
about
this.
this. I just want to reiterate what I've said before, that this is a great advance. It's a quantitative way of explaining the different phases, which has a lot of validity. And it's, it turned out, and as we discussed last week, it led to Anaxagoras' views, and it's just an important alternative in discussing metaphysics.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, move on.
Yeah. There is an inconsistency here, which Parmenides, in fact, pointed out. No doubt the theory of Anaximenes squares with observation, for fire, when cooked and thickened, becomes smoke, and smoke is easy to regard at this stage of thought as a kind of fog or mist. Condensed mist is water, and water thickened still more becomes ice, a solid, a kind of stone. But is the theory compatible with logic? Fire is identical with the hot and dry. Water is identical with the cold and wet. How then can one be transformed into the other without violating the fundamental principle that nothing can come from nothing. Where did the cold come from? Where has the hot gone? If cold and hot are thought of, so to speak, as substances, it seems that there can be no satisfactory answer to this question. Something has come out of nothing, something has disappeared into nothing. We're still, as Parmenides saw, if there is ultimately just one stuff, it
Where you
is
stop? Okay.
so that it cannot, it is so that it cannot logically be both hot and cold, both wet and dry. Therefore, change is impossible. If things seem to change, as they do, this must be mere illusion, for logic pronounces it contradictory.
Okay, so here is starting to after Parmenides start people start to, I'm not sure during that time, but we can see the problem by not separating things and its qualities. Okay, and then they that's the solution we need.
Well, I just want to point out that Anaximander had already anticipated that problem.
Yes.
Anaximander said, look, you can't turn hot into cold, you know, you can't turn water, which Thales had argued is primary, into dryness, you know. And so his solution was to discuss substance as something that was indefinite, in other words, neutral, in other words, not any, no, possessing no qualities, just a blend of qualities.
Well,
He
that's
had a
you are
kind
talking
of
about
solution.
a how do you call it?
Aperon,
Apparel, right? That's he called the apparel.
yeah, apeiron, yeah,
Apparel, right?
yeah,
APIRON, apparel. APEIRON.
that's right. Apeiron,
Yeah,
apeiron,
apparel. Okay.
yeah. So he had a solution, and some people say Anaximenes went backwards from that point. But
Okay.
I really
Yeah, that,
like all of the thinking of all of these great thinkers, because you take Thales, we don't have a lot of information about Thales, but if you look at water and you look at a puddle, you can watch it disappear and turn into air. And then overnight, it turns into a solid. So just the observation that one substance can turn into many different things with different qualities, you know, seems to suggest that there is some kind of unifying substance underneath it all. But they still were stuck, all of them were stuck on the idea that what we consider to be different sensations were actually realities that existed objectively in the world. And they didn't see how, if all of these different sensation, these qualities can, you know, they didn't see how they could turn into each other. So anyway, they're going through a period of 100 years when they're doing a lot of thinking, and it's really very impressive.
yeah, that's true. Okay, next one.
Okay, it is important to see that Parmenides was right given his assumptions of monism, nothing from nothing, and identity of things and qualities. Parmenides had another argument, a fallacious one, to show that the kind of change called motion cannot really occur. It is this: if a thing moves, there must be room for it to move into. That is, there must be empty space. But there cannot be any empty space, for empty space would be just nothing, that which is not. And the assertion that there is empty space amounts to saying that which is not is a statement of contradiction.
So here is he tried to, yeah, because everybody have to respond to Parmenides after.
Because everyone already knew that you can't get something from nothing. That was just an assumption that everyone made. Parmenides dealt with that directly.
Yeah, instead of saying Parmenides made a great contribution, probably better another way to say is Parmenides is a great question, and so everybody have to resolve. So,
I agree that he did
or
ask a great
he
question.
gave everybody a hard time. So,
He did, because he saw the flaw in everybody's thinking. But I want to talk about his contribution just briefly.
okay.
As you know, I believe that there are two great traditions in philosophy, the empirical scientific tradition and the rationalist tradition. And the rationalist tradition, from my inspection, now people would, perhaps disagree with me, but a lot of it is based on the definition of words. And we see this, for example, with Anselm, who talks about how God is perfect and therefore God exists, because by definition, existence comes from perfection. We see very similar kind of argument with Parmenides and a line of thinking which is all based on the definition of words. This whole tradition of using the definition of words and turning it into a train of thought which could be intellectually important is what eventually led to the development of mathematics and science as a mathematical discipline. So if we are going to value mathematics and science as a mathematical discipline and the syllogism and deduction in general, then we have to give Parmenides great credit for originating this whole tradition. Now, I know that what I'm saying is argumentative, because I think that some people would say, look, Parmenides is not just talking about definitions of words, but that's an easy way to grasp, to access an understanding of some of these arguments. A lot of them are based on definitions. And when you think about it, that's a very important development, because just using the definitions of words like triangle and various other words, you can wind up, by manipulating these symbols in certain ways, you can wind up learning a lot of new things. You're on mute.
I might not think about the concept of definition is from Parmenides. I think it's more from Plato's, you know.
Plato came after Parmenides and based
Of course,
everything
yeah.
on Parmenides.
Yes, so it's not very clear about the concept of definition. In another way, talk about we take out the word away from the daily life and try to make a definition. Uh, in this concept, Parmenides already start have this kind of flavor, right? So, uh, suppose let's say soul, or we talk about soul, or talk about happiness. Okay, this concept of happiness supposed to be in our daily life, but Parmenides Plato tradition start to take this word happiness away from our daily life and put on the paper and start to talk about this. I think that's the great change. Okay, I may not want to say
Okay,
progress,
let
but
me tell you how I respond. my response is that I agree with you totally that Plato should be given almost full credit for inventing the importance of the definition, abstracting definitions. What Parmenides did, though, is he developed a deductive form of reasoning based on definitions.
Yeah.
And so one person did part of the process and the other person did another part. Both were great originators, both great contributors in my mind.
Yeah, that's nothing wrong, I think. Right. So
The philosophers, okay?
yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
The philosophers,
The philosophy of
the
is that
philosophy of Anaxagoras successfully met Parmenides' criticism, but at too high a price. While it is hard to say precisely just what it is that we are asking for when we demand an explanation of something, at any rate, it is clear that an explanation is not satisfactory unless, in some sense, the ideas used in the explanation are simpler or more unified than the thing to be explained. But if one's explanatory principles are as diverse as the things to be explained, the requirement cannot be met. Flour is a mixture in which flour stuff predominates, and water is a mixture in which water stuff predominates. And the two make bread because they are mixed and baked. The bread stuff in both of them comes to the fore. This may be true, but it is too easy and it does not explain anything.
I think we talked about this
Well,
before.
I just want to say something about it. That I agree that that's why ultimately Anaxagoras, even though he proposed a coherent solution to the problem, an ingeniously coherent solution, that his model of explanation, even though it was coherent, turned out not to be as useful as other models that were going to be proposed. And in my opinion, models of explanation are often evaluated according to their utility. And part of the utility of a model is based on the amount that it's able to create unity. So Anaximander, I love his solution. And as I was explaining at another week, it's not implausible that everything could be contained in a microcosm. I gave the example of how a single chromosome in the human body can recreate an entire human being with everything. Trillions and trillions of biochemical reactions, all contained in one microscopic entity. And it's possible. I also like Anaxagoras' view, which you were able to explain to me, that simply by cutting, things get smaller and smaller until they disappear. And I thought of an example of that. Suppose you have a lump of salt and you put that salt into water. Where does the salt go? You can't feel it. You can't see it. It disappears. And the reason that we now know is that there's chemical ionization. So the salt spreads itself through the water until it's only a molecular in length. And it's kind of a way to think about the idea that separation can cause things to disappear. I don't know. What do you think about that example?
Um,
When
I think
something becomes a solution, it appears to disappear, and you can't sense it in any way.
well, so I think that's a great example. You put salt in the water, which challenge Democritus atoms theory, right? So probably it proved Anaxagoras has a better solution than Democritus.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part. Yeah. So by reading to this point, I kind of have agree on the first page McGill talking about. the Greeks make all possible guesses. So
Yeah, exactly. And like I was saying before, they make a lot of different guesses, and later philosophers decide which one is
that's
handiest.
right. Which one is important? And then back to another thing is because they are marine cities and they do seafarers, so they do see a lot of changes. So
Right.
that's why they can possibly guess every possible
Yeah, that's
idea.
right.
So,
Yeah, because they're the ultimate in cosmopolitanism.
okay, next.
Okay, Leucippus and Democritus discovered a better way of answering Parmenides as to motion. Leucippus flatly declared that nothing does exist, while Democritus more appropriately dismissed Parmenides' quibble with another. Hing exists no more than not hing. The point of the joke being that if nothing does not exist is a truth of logic, elimination of the double negative must also produce a logical truth. Hing does exist, but hing, so far from existing, is not even a word. Greek for nothing is medin, of which me means not, while den has no meaning in isolation.
I think nothing come from the word not thing
Yeah,
and
not thing. Yeah,
or no thing, right?
yeah,
Okay.
no thing. Yeah,
Or they do the nothing, but remove the double T, I think.
yeah, right. So Democritus and Leucippus have different answers to the challenge of Parmenides. Leucippus argues that nothing is a thing. Democritus argues using a play on words. Now, I happen to prefer Leucippus's solution.
Uh, Lucifer's talking about nothing as a thing.
Yeah,
Okay. And then
Democritus
Democritus talking
uses the
about
double
thing
negative.
as a thing, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you.
So
I'm
one uses, I think it's really important to realize, as I've said many times, that the empty void in the universe is a thing. And I think that the philosophers who recognize that, including modern scientists, are on the right track. That just because you don't have matter filling it doesn't mean that empty space isn't a thing. I think that empty space, it's important to realize that empty space has many properties, even without
yeah,
any particles in it. It's a thing.
yeah, I think I do see that's a big difference between democratics and Lucifers, right?
Yeah,
Because nothing as a thing doesn't equate to not thing. Okay, I think that's a
yeah,
different
right.
concept, and I think the Western development are more follow democratics than following Lucifer's because
Yeah, I think so.
and I do see Indian does one of great Indian philosophy is they see nothing as a thing. Okay. And I think this one leads to their invention of the concept of zero, which is unique in all culture.
Right.
And we should know how important of this zero happened. Without the concept of zero, we cannot do math. I don't think we can possibly do math, you know.
I agree. However, I just want to argue that the concept of zero to me, has never been impressive. And
Why?
let me tell you why not. Because the way that I view numbers is as an instrument which describes plurality. When you see something repeat twice, that when it repeats once, you call that by the number 2. When it repeats twice, you call that by the number 3. It's easy to work backwards and have a symbol for something that doesn't repeat. We'll call that 1. And it's easy to work backwards from that and say, well, if if there's a symbol for 1, then if there's nothing there, we'll have a symbol for that. That's why, to me, the concept of 0 makes perfect sense. It's just another, it's a slight addition to the whole concept of using symbols to describe plurality.
Well, let's put it this way. Yes, I agree with you, but the problem is this: the concept of 0 exists in all culture, but
Good.
embodiment of nothing, okay, it doesn't exist in all culture, only exists in India. Okay, embodiment, I'm talking about.
Nothing is just 1 less than 1.
Yeah, that's everybody have this concept. Even the 3 years old can have this concept. That's nothing. It's gone. As long as you are human. Okay. Well, even animal have a concept of, oh, I lost all my chicken egg. So that's the concept. I think the concept is there. But to embodiment, they say, okay, this guy represents nothing. Okay. This kind of concept is unique. That's what I'm talking about.
Hey, maybe you
So
can explain this to me.
you don't see this one as 1. Right now you start to see this one as 0, but this one as 1. Okay, 2 of this one means 2, but this guy means 0. I think this concept is non-nature. Okay, it requires some advanced thinking.
Okay, let me pursue this because I want to understand this, because I know that you've stressed this a lot. And I know that nothingness is emphasized in Buddhism and various other philosophies that you're interested in. And I'm not going to make any comment about that. I'm just talking about plurality. When you see that something repeats, you need 2 concepts. First of all, you have to realize that both of those things are things. That's the first thing.
Yeah,
The second thing you have to realize is that every time there's a repetition, you add a new symbol.
that's right.
So when we have 1 repetition, then we have the number 2 to represent that. When we don't repeat anything, we have the number 1 to represent that. It's just going backwards. And
That's
if
right.
we go backwards and we have no thing, then we have a symbol for that. I just,
No, we don't.
sorry,
The problem is we don't until Indian make it. We don't, we make a symbol for double, we make a symbol for 1, but we don't make a symbol for 0. You look at the world, they don't have they never consider 0 as a number. I think that's the problem.
okay.
Yeah, and I do this because read the ancient Chinese text. Okay, they use a lot of modern English translation, translate as empty or emptiness. But there's a 2 word in the ancient world. They don't, before Buddhism, Chinese don't use emptiness, or they have the emptiness, but which means taking something out. Okay, the Chinese will call 虚, which means taking something out. Okay, and after Buddhism, Chinese start to use the word called 无, which is emptiness. Okay, so I think these 2 concepts both translate as emptiness, but the formal, taking something out, remove everything, is different than nothingness, which is emptiness. I think that's the
Yeah, I can see that.
difference. You can see the
Oh,
subtle
sure.
difference.
Yeah,
Right?
the different uses of, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so next one.
Okay, there is then a void and things that move in it. These things are atoms, uncuttables. Each separate atom is like the reality of Parmenides, uncreated, indestructible, unchanging. The matter in an atom is homogeneous and nothing can happen to one internally. That is, each atom is infinitely hard. Atoms differ from one another in size and shape, that is all. They do not differ in color, for instance, but not because they are all the same color. They do so because they have no color at all, not even black or gray. Similarly, for heat, moisture, taste, and odor, atoms have always been and always will be in motion, like the motes in a sunbeam. They jostle one another, and in their jostlings, two kinds of processes occur that result in the coming into being of the large-scale aggregates with which we are familiar. One is vortex motion, the effect of which is to separate random aggregates according to likenesses, the heavier, that is the bigger atoms going to the center, the lighter ones to the periphery. The other process is hooking onto each other by atoms of like configurations.
So right now we start to talk about Democritus theory.
Yeah, finally.
Yeah. I like the word they use, what do they call it? Modes in the sunbeam?
Mode in the sunlight, in the light beam.
In the sunbeam here, the words like the modes in a sunbeam. Okay.
Sunbeam. That's a famous image that he used.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's one of the fragments they have.
I thought when I was a kindergarten or in first grader, I noticed that when you in the classroom you have a daydreaming and you see the sunlight, you see I kind of wondering why all these modes, all moving. I don't know. You have the same experience?
No, but I wasn't a bright child.
Okay. You
I
focus
was an
on the,
inquisitive child.
you don't daydream.
No, I will say that when I would watch dust particles in a beam of light, it did seem peculiar that they all seemed to be moving around.
Yeah, they see that. I
And
see like
instead of staying still, they're always
I'm not sure.
moving.
I'm not sure today's kids see that. Is that because our air is more clean? So there's no dust, right? Because I remember during that time, I think there's a lot of dust everywhere. So, and I was in the country, sort of countryside. So it's a lot of dust even in the classroom. So that's why we have the opportunity to see that. But I'm not sure, today's kids stay in clean air conditioned room, and they probably have no chance to see that. So
Could be.
yeah, whenever they have a dust, they say, "Oh, that's not healthy," and they cause allergy reaction. So let's clean it. So we don't see it anymore.
Well, there's a lot that interests me about this paragraph. The first is that it's important to understand that Democritus believed that atoms didn't stay still, they were in constant motion. There's really a lot you can say about that, but I'll just bring up a couple of points. First of all, during the 1600s, there was a competition between what model would be used to explain the world. And there were some who were arguing the atomic theory and others who were arguing the corpuscular theory or the corpuscular theory. And Descartes believed in the corpuscular theory, which was that tiny bits are in a constant vortex, constantly whirling around. So he might have gotten that from Democritus. Nowadays, we don't look at that at all because we think of atoms as, crystallized often. We don't think of them as in constant motion. Although on a micro level, they all are in constant motion. There's no, if you get to a microscopic enough view, there is no atom that's perfectly stationary. If they're perfectly stationary, that's absolute zero. And atoms don't ever reach that level or rarely do. So anyway, the other thing that interests me about the paragraph is this notion of a vortex. It seems as if a lot of the early philosophers were obsessed with this notion of vortex. And you see it again and again in all of their cosmologies.
Yeah.
And I'm going to speculate that the reason for this is simply that they watch the stars move across the sky and they watch some of the constellations move in a circle. And the combination of that made them feel that a whirling motion is somehow fundamental to motion in the world. And we're going to see it later with Aristotle too. He's going to talk about this whirling motion that's set in motion by the prime mover.
Well,
So
okay, go ahead.
that's it.
Yeah, another thing that I do see is he set up the way to anti permanencies, right? So permanencies say motion is not possible. Right now, he
Yeah.
wants to say
His is the opposite.
that's the opposite.
Motion is
Everything is
everywhere, constantly.
moving. Yeah, and in this, and then you just too small, you don't see it. And then permanently talk about this world is one big, unique, homogeneous being. And he just want to say, no, it's not one big one. That's many, many tiny, tiny, small ones.
That's
So
right. That's a great point. Yeah.
I think in a way he is try to talking about, let's imagine, he probably tried to say, since you say there's nothing moving, but if I assume everything is constantly moving, still explain the same thing. When you see in this world, there's one big being, one unique being. If I break down to a many, many, many things, it still explain the same thing. I think that's another way to
That's
look.
another great point.
Yeah.
I agree.
To the last.
Okay. One atom can affect another only by colliding with it, and the outcome of a collision, hooking, or change of direction or speed is determined by the sizes, shapes, and velocities of the atoms involved in the collision. But the sizes and shapes are eternal, and the velocities in their turn are outcomes of previous collisions. Therefore, there is no such thing as chance in nature. Nothing happens at random, Leucippus pronounced in the one sentence of his that has survived, but everything from a rationale and by necessity. Ideally, explanation should consist in finding out the laws of motion and impact and using these to show how one atomic configuration came about from a previous one. Such a complex act is, of course, impossible. However, Democritus sought to apply the fundamental idea of mechanical causation to observable phenomena.
So one thing is, does Democritus know Empedocles? Does any secondary source talk about he mentioned about Empedocles?
No, I don't know.
But he probably know Empedocles, right? It's later, and
Yeah.
then 460.
Empedocles was over in Sicily.
Yeah, it's on the other side, and he is Democritus is 30 years younger.
Yeah.
Is it right? It's no older, no younger. Eh? Yeah, younger, 30 years younger.
I'm not sure how influenced he was from Anaxagoras and Empedocles.
I do see they have relation, the continuity from Empedocles. So, for example, like this one, Empedocles talking about the force, right? Two kind of force, external force, and then Empedocles also talking about this. I think he talk about necessity and the chance, and then here Democritus kind of reject
Wait a
chance.
second. Empedocles talked about love and strife, right?
Yeah. And in his word, Empedocles' word, uh, that the chance and the necessity, both these two partners. Okay. And then I do see the Democritus want to get rid of chance and build the world is
Yeah,
100%
okay.
mechanism. Okay.
Yeah.
And then Empedocles try to simplify this world, the structure with four elements, or you want to call it the four root. And then Democritus try to simplify in a way as an atom, like a fundamental. So they all do have this kind of concept, and which is more advanced than most of what the early Milesian philosopher. They seem to oversimplify it, just use water, epiiron, or fire, or mist to as the uh, basic stuff. Uh, I think that's how I see they.
Well, I don't blame them for trying to simplify because that's the whole point of a model. You want to simplify as much as possible. And the observation backs it up because we can see that water can take different forms and, you know, mist can take different forms and so on. And so we watch these, you know, these different substances change. And so then we want to find out what the unifying structure underneath is. That they ran into, you know, they ran into difficulty because they believed that qualities were real, and that didn't agree with something can't come from nothing. So then, you know, then Empedocles and Anaxagoras come along, and they're trying to offer the simplest model that they can. And so Empedocles, let's just stick to the four substances. Empedocles offers four substances instead of one. And this is a way that he was able to reconcile all of the difficulties, because within those four substances contain all of the qualities that are in everything. So if you say that earth and, you know, something else are combined, then you get the qualities of bread, because bread is brown also. So all the qualities in these four. So here's the question. Why didn't he begin with six substances? The answer is, this is a great question. And it's a question that's constantly asked of me when I propose all my models. Because I have models, I have one model with 5, one with 4, one with 2. And people go, why? Why that number?
Yeah, I'd like to hear your answer. Why is 4, not 7?
And
Or,
I'll give the same answer that Empedocles should have given.
yeah.
Models attempt to simplify as much as possible and retain their coherence. Empedocles, with those 4, was the simplest model that he could create, which included everything. And
Well,
so the reason that he doesn't have 5 instead of 4, 5 would have worked, but 4 was the simpler one. So you have to look at models. A great part of their benefit is their utility. And it's just like they were saying, McGill was talking about Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras had a great coherent system, but it didn't have utility because it didn't simplify. Everything in the world is in every particle. It's coherent, but it doesn't simplify anything. So what you try to do is simplify as much as possible and still maintain integrity and coherence.
I do see they miss one thing is the gold, the metal, right? How is if you miss the metal, how does the metal coming from?
Where does metal come from?
Yeah, so basically you talk about four element, four root, right? Basically, these four things can build everything in this world, okay? So I can easily explain this box is come from Earth with some mix it together. You find that.
Yeah, the
Then,
Chinese included metal, huh?
yeah, the
Why
metal,
there's
where's
some.
metal coming
Well, see,
from?
the Chinese outthought the Greeks at that point.
You get the Chinese got the five element. So
You know, I think that the reason has to do with tradition. The Greeks have a long tradition of air, fire, water, and earth. They have been looking at those four substances, and you see them talked about in Thales and in Anaximander and Anaximenes. They all mention them. They say, how do they all talk about those four. So I think that that was part of the common tradition to have those four foundational. I don't think that these later philosophers just came up of it out of the spur of their,
I agree
imagination.
with you. Let me explain to you what's the tradition coming from. Okay. I think the tradition is they already have okay. I think the tradition is the Greek they already have the concept of some quality because if you look at around the world, if you look at the quality, actually only have a four quality. Okay, two pair, right? Hot and the cold. Okay, and the dry and the wet. That's only two focus. And then you make this combination. Okay, so that come with four element. Okay, nothing more because 2 times 2 equal 4, right? Hot and the dry is fire. Okay, I think hot and fire and the cold and I think that's easy. Same as the Chinese five element, not because the Chinese outsmart Greek, because the Chinese have the traditional book. Actually, five element is wrong name. Okay, Chinese call five faces or five action. Actually, that's from the ancient government setup. As an emperor have the five action you need to take care of. Okay, the government function. And later on, people still start to use, Chinese like to dig through the ancient textbook. So when they dig this one, they gradually develop this one as a five element. So, so that's
Yeah, exactly.
okay. Let's move on for
Yes.
another interesting story.
There is
If
an ancient story that illustrates his method and points up its difference from traditional concepts. Considerable interest had been aroused by the extraordinary death of a prominent man. When he was strolling along a beach, an eagle has dropped a turtle on his head. Why? It was recalled that an oracle had said that he would die if a bolt from Zeus. This had been thought to be a prediction of death by a stroke of lightning. But someone pointed out that the eagle was a bird sacred to Zeus. Thus, the oracle was fulfilled. This explanation satisfied most Greeks, but not Democritus. He went to the beach and observed the habits of eagles. He found that they were fond of turtle meat. In order to get at it, an eagle would seize a turtle in his talons, fly into the air with it, and drop it on a rock to crack the shell. This observation, together with the fact that the deceased had been bald, provided an explanation that satisfied Democritus. The curious event was shown to be one item in a natural regularity or pattern. It was unnecessary to postulate the purposes of unseen beings to account for this fact. Aristotle complained quite unjustifiably that Democritus reduced the explanation of nature to the statement, thus it happened formally also. The fact is that Democritus understood the character of scientific explanation far better than did Aristotle.
so this one is the same view as Bertrand Russell's view on compare Aristotle and uh, Democritus.
Yeah.
And that famous guy is Asclepius, right?
I pronounce his name Aeschylus.
Aeschylus.
Yeah.
As Ascid as not as Aeschylus. Okay, I take your word. Aeschylus. Okay.
He wrote, among other things, the famous play Agamemnon, famous Aresti tragedy.
Is Prometheus bound?
Yes.
He also wrote this one. I think we read this one. At least I read this one with David Johnson's school.
Yeah.
And that by Lizzie. I still remember. That's a great story.
That's a great story. Really fantastic. Really amazing. Okay, well, let me say something about this paragraph. I really love this paragraph, even though it seems not to invent a new idea. It seems to simply be an expression of an idea that everybody already believed in the first place. But the use of a homely example like the one with the eagle really illustrates the difference between the new method of the Ionians, the Milesians, and the older method using the gods. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a couple of other important contributions that two different philosophers made. First of all, there's Bacon, who may not have invented the experiment, but he gives a lot of examples and makes a pitch for using the experiment as a new methodology. That's what I love about Bacon.
Mhm.
Not the fact that he invented something new, but that he made a persuasive argument for using a new methodology. And the other person is Empedocles that we just read last week, who talks about the fact that we should not avoid the senses. All of the senses are important in doing our observations, and we should gather evidence through our senses. I don't know if you recall that little paragraph. It wasn't as prominent as this paragraph, but just the notion that he was making an argument for a new kind of methodology, which would turn out to be the methodology of empiricism. I think some of these contributions are more important than any discoveries or, any, whatever it is philosophers do, and take most, put most of their effort into.
Yeah, because you are Baconian, so you will say so.
I'm Baconian, exactly. That's what I love about Bacon, and that's what I love about this guy. That methodology is
Yeah.
important. It's an important aspect of philosophy to introduce a methodology. Exactly.
Yeah, in some.
Okay. In sum, Democritus's reason for asserting that reality consists of atoms moving in the void is that this statement can be deduced from the premises: one, nothing can come from nothing; two, change really occurs; and three, motion requires a void. That explanation must be mechanistic. Also follows from these assumptions if it is further allowed that all interaction is impact. Democritus's mechanism was also the culmination of the rejection of animistic and supernatural will forces by all his philosophical predecessors.
So Democritus is true atheist. He probably never talk about God. All other pre-Socratic philosophers, they all sort of mention about God, divine power. He probably no.
I don't know. We know that Epicurus believed in gods.
Epicurus believe in God. Yes.
And Epicurus took a lot of his philosophy in Democritus. Remember that Epicurus argued that gods are remote and they don't pay any attention or ever
I
intervene,
know,
and they're made out of atoms. So
but
that was Epicurus's notion. I can't remember what secondary sources say about
for
Democritus.
some reason, I do see Democritus is a radical rationalist, and then I believe he is so-called nihilist. Okay, very well. Probably I just not long ago I read Turgenev, Fathers and the Sons. Okay, that's why I do see the similarity between Democritus and the Bazarov, which is the nihilist in Turgenev's novel.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah,
And
well,
for a nihilist, for sure, they must be atheist.
yeah. Well, you can make an argument that he's a nihilist, and I think the strongest argument might be Protagoras's views, who is a moral relativist, a sophist. But I think the
Okay.
argument against it are the excerpts we have from his moral teachings, which seem to talk about the importance of duty and intention and having the right mindset and various other things. Now, you still could argue he's a moral nihilist and just argue that that's how you can be
No,
happy.
no, no, no. I think that when we talk about nihilism, we should not. It's a different. Well, I think it's sometimes wrong word to talk
Well, there's
about.
different definitions of nihilism.
Yeah, I don't see moral nihilist. Okay, uh, it's hard to say because when we use the word moral nihilist, sometimes it means the person has no moral sense. But I disagree. I think when for the nihilists, they have a strong moral sense. Okay, they just don't respect tradition, don't respect convention. Okay, I think that's the difference. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's plausible.
Yeah. So, for example, the nihilists may disrespect their parents. Okay, that doesn't mean that they are immoral. Okay, because their
Well, of
parents
course not.
wrong. Huh?
Of course
Right?
not.
Yeah,
Well, just
because
because you break taboos doesn't make you a nihilist.
that's
You
right.
can be a
That's right.
rebellious
Or
teenager and
a nihilist not necessarily break the not necessary. Let's put this way. Well, put this way, I do see nihilists has a strong moral sense and sometimes it's stronger than most of the people. Okay.
yeah, okay. It's a nuanced ethical viewpoint.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
It's not
nuance.
easy.
It's
You can't,
disturbing. Okay,
there's
so
a lot to talk about
a
when it
lot to
comes to
talk about.
questions.
And the reason I bring this one of one of the reason, of course, because I not long ago I read Turgenev's
Yeah, that's a great book.
and
Yeah.
then another reason is I forget the other reason. Oh yeah,
Okay.
because I think very hard about I read the original, so-called original fragment, okay, of Democritus writing, because I do see he has a lot of wisdom statement, okay, a lot of crazy statement, a lot of tips about how to live our life. Okay, that's how I see uh, his nihilistic view. Okay, on that because I have to connect his I have rebuilt his metaphysics. Let's put it this way. Okay.
Well, since we're continuing to talk on this topic, I'll just mention that for me, there are two great divisions in ethics. There's ethics that's based on right and wrong, and ethics that's based on eudaimonia or flourishing, and what makes people happy. An ethics that is based on what makes people happy essentially is nihilistic because it doesn't believe in right and wrong. And it may
Okay,
involve
yes.
ethics, because maybe that makes people happy. But essentially, I think it's nihilistic.
Yeah, I agree with you because I also see nihilistic moral theory is very utilitarian, ethic. Yeah, because they are consequentialist. Okay, let's put it this way.
That's right.
Okay, so next, where we are? Okay, here.
Democritus's atomism and still more his mechanism agree in principle with the fundamental tenets of modern physical science. By in principle, it is meant to rule out as inessential, though important, such differences as that the particles of the present day physicists are wave packets or whatever, and fuzzy and hookless. What is essential is the concept of matter as somehow granular, and that physical processes are analyzable into redistributions of energy among these grains. What modern physicists have that Democritus lacked is a conception of controlled quantitative experimentation together with the technique of mathematical manipulation of the data. For this reason, Democritus, though he declared that he would rather discover one causal explanation than gain the kingdom of the Persians, failed utterly to add to detailed knowledge of nature. In fact, he was much behind his own times, still believing, for instance, that the earth is a flat disk, though the Pythagoreans had long understood its sphericity. In detailed explanations, Democritus could do no better than this. Thunder is produced by an unstable mixture forcing the cloud, enclosing it to move downward. Lightning is a clashing together of clouds by which the fire-producing atoms, rubbing against each other, are assembled through the porous mass into one place and pass out. And the thunderbolt occurs when the motion is forced by the very pure, very fine, very uniform, and closely packed fire-producing atoms, as he himself calls them. The foregoing is an ancient paraphrase, not a quotation from Democritus. It must be admitted that this account of lightning is no worse than any prior to Franklin and a considerable improvement over Zeus is angry.
Oh, right now I know he talked about Benjamin Franklin. Okay, so
Right.
okay, so I didn't think about him, so I kind of think where is Franklin coming from? So okay,
Benjamin Franklin,
okay.
great discoverer that lightning is made of electricity.
Well, I'm not sure what to talk about on this one, but I think only thing in my note is compared to modern uh theory, okay, quantum physics, okay. So wave packet, okay, and about matter as energy matter, that's in the modern theory, which Democritus are all wrong, okay, because well, I think it's of course it's when I say wrong, it's an unfair comparison with quantum physics. Uh,
No, I think it's fair.
well,
I think
it's
it's
fair.
perfectly fair to
Okay.
try
I think
to estimate.
unfair to Democritus. It's like
I think it's
20.
fair to Democritus and to our
Well, actually,
estimation of Democritus' contribution.
what Democritus talking about atom, right? He talking about they have the different kind of shape. Okay.
Yeah.
What else he talk about?
He talks
Uh,
about their shape, their size, and their
oh, the
motion,
size, right? Size and the shape. And then does he talk about
and their motion also.
emotion, right? How does he
He doesn't talk about hardness. He doesn't talk about anything else. Everything is
how
based on hooks and
How does
gadgets
it?
and mechanics.
Well, but the size should determine the weight, right? The matter.
No, what determines the weight, according to secondary sources I read, is how close the atoms are packed together.
How close are packed together?
Yeah,
Oh, how dense of
how
the atom?
dense, which I think is pretty good. There is some truth.
Actually,
There is some truth in that. That the atoms that weigh more are the ones which have the densest nucleons,
okay. But I
and
think
not
that's
so
why
the atoms have those properties.
I say if I compare with the modern quantum physics, he did very wrong on the concept of atom here because in the quantum, that's the atom, that take the quantum level. Basically, there's no shape, there's no size. Okay, so but they do have
But
matter.
atoms do have shape.
Atom has no
He
shape.
wasn't talking about subatomic particles. That's true. But looking at his, his speculation about the different qualities of atoms and how they operate.
Does the atom has shape? No.
Atom conglomerates have shapes. That's the whole point, that objects have size, the primary qualities.
I
Um,
think what proper way you are talking about is talking about not atom. If compared to modern science, his atom should be element, right? Should
no,
be element.
no, because atoms are an element is the well,
I think it should
there's
be
an overlap between the elements and atoms.
yeah,
I agree.
I think
But
so
when
if
he's talking about atoms, he's talking about the particles that can't be divided.
well we can say this way, right? Element is a particle cannot be divided. Okay, let's say
No,
H2O.
an element is a type of atom. An element is a type of substance. An atom is an unbreakable particle. So nowadays we have
Hold on.
100 elements.
I think I need to make it clear on that's use forget about Democritus. Okay, the modern term, right?
Yeah, the modern term, there are 108 elements, which are different types of atoms. So there are 108 types of atoms.
Oh, okay, that's how.
They're not based on shape. They're based on a number of protons.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think that I need a high school teacher to tell me, refresh me on. Yeah, because I kind of confused when I think about when I read the atom, I kind of think about the particle, either proton or neutron or electron. Okay, I kind of think so. I was wrong. I was wrong. Yeah. Yes.
Well,
Okay.
I don't think you're wrong when you say that the proton and neutrons and electrons are particles. I think that's
Well,
perfectly fair.
but
That's the
when
modern view of the particle.
yes, but when I read the Democritus and I when he talk about atom, I kind of think about particle, not atom, which it should be element. Okay, so I think I got yeah. They have the 108, 114, right?
I don't know.
Different kind of
Something.
element. It's also to say 114 different kind of atom. Okay, which means Democritus has very correct in the
No,
understanding.
Democritus only believed there was one kind.
No, Democritus
There's
has
only
many kind of atom.
Well, there's an infinite amount of shapes of atoms.
Hold on, let's make it clear. Let's go back to
There's
2500.
only one homogeneous substance, though,
Well,
that all
yes,
atoms are made of.
but
So,
they have the different size, they have the different shape,
yeah,
right?
but atoms are elements aren't based on size. They're based on,
So does that mean
we
they
don't
have the
differentiate an atom by its size.
yeah, so okay, let me ask you the question. According to Democritus, uh, there is a two identical atom, or every single atom are different. Is different.
I don't know.
I think that's a big question, right? So
Nah, not necessarily.
I will assume the modern
I don't
democracy.
understand what a big question is. Let's say that you have two atoms that are identical. Who cares? I mean, the appointed thing is that there are trillions and trillions of different kinds, of different shapes of atoms. If a
Well,
couple of them are the same, it doesn't matter.
okay, so that will say the modern Democritus will say there's only 114 kind of
Right,
atoms, right?
right.
Okay,
And I
based
think
on
that,
their shape and the size. Okay, and the shape or size will define or determine for 114 different kind of properties.
yeah,
Okay, gold is hard. Okay, it is hard. They have the hardness, and let's say lead is soft, something like this.
yeah, right. Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, okay,
Okay, I just want to make a couple of comments about the hooks.
okay, go ahead.
So the different shapes allow for hooks, which allow the particles to attach to each other. That's a
Okay,
pretty
so
good
the hook
idea.
they are talking about really, they talk about the hook, right? They talk about this
You
hook
talk about real hooks.
like this, right? So,
Yep.
okay,
And that's how atoms stick together through those hooks.
that's interesting
That's really interesting the way that
because they
they
don't
use their
know.
knowledge of the tools that were being used around them to speculate what was going on a micro level. And it was
Yeah,
hooks.
yeah, I think that's a good guess because
I agree.
there's no way they expect they know that
They
it
don't know
trans.
electromagnetic force.
Yeah,
But
electromagnetic.
there's something interesting that is part of my reading in biology, which is that the way that the first multicellular animals formed is that there is a protist which called the choanoflagellate, which actually has hooks. And
Okay,
this is explained by Richard Dawkins in his great book on evolution. And they hook together. And that's how the first multicellular creatures were formed. Then gradually their genetics,
okay,
overlapped. But it's kind of interesting that actually there is a parallel in life. That's it.
okay. Let's move on.
Yeah. By
By con
convention, color, by convention sweet, by convention bitter, but in reality atoms and void. Thus Democritus states his theory. The atoms alone are real, and their only inherent qualities, we can use this word now for Democritus distinguished for the first time clearly between thing and quality, are size, shape, and solidity. Then what about color, sweet, bitter, and the rest? They are by convention. What does this mean? Democritus held that a man's soul consists of particularly fine and spherical, hence mobile, atoms. When certain images from the external world, the images being, of course, themselves assemblages of atoms, impinge on the soul atoms, a sensation is produced. The sensation occurs only within the ensouled body, hence is not out there because the external world is colorless and odorless. This is a part of the meaning of by convention, a phrase that might be rendered as subjective. The sensations are also subjective in the sense that they lead us to suppose falsely that the world is colored and odorous.
Okay, so here's the primary and the secondary quality coming out. So
Right. It certainly is familiar to us, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, it's very
Having
familiar.
been reading about the primary and secondary qualities and being told again and again that this was a great insight of modern times, one of the greatest
Yeah,
insights ever, and then
and the
finding
same.
it in these older philosophers.
Yeah, I think the logically he's right. Nothing wrong logically, and it's explainable. This word is colorless, odorless, tasteless. everything is on earth. So I don't see
What a
anything on that.
bizarre, counterintuitive idea that probably astounded people to think that the real world is full of colorless, odorless.
Yeah, that's I start to believe he is a radical rationalist. Okay, so whatever explainable, it works. So it don't
Exactly.
even
But he had a good teacher, which is Parmenides. If Parmenides can argue that everything is completely motionless, then at that point, Democritus probably felt, that it was perfectly legitimate to argue that the world doesn't have any color or smell.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Because Parmenides
I
is
think
a real radical.
he and the empathic he and Parmenides have the same level of the so-called radical, same
They're
kind
both
of
extreme radicals. I agree.
yeah, they both are
Remember
stream.
that Democritus was hated in ancient times, and he was a prolific author, one of the most prolific authors of all ancient times. All of his books were destroyed. And
Being
there's only a
destroyed on
couple of
purpose.
fragments and paraphrases.
Is that the being destroyed on purpose?
I believe they were. I believe that the people of ancient times had no use for Democritus, especially when the Christians came along.
Oh yeah, that's right. They love it.
And there were hundreds of years that they had to burn the books.
Sometimes when I think we will many times. I think they probably have 1.5 years. I keep constantly read, uh, Plato's dialogue. Okay, every week. Um,
Plato argued, is said to have made the assertion that he wished every book by Democritus could be burned.
I don't.
He said
I
that literally. He's famous for
I
that statement.
I will. I believe so because so many times when I read, let's put it this way. When I read Plato's dialogue, so many times I feel the common or popular thinking during the Plato's time in Greek, probably very democratic, okay, very materialistic thinking. That's why Plato worked so hard to write his philosophy. Okay. And
That's a
then,
great point. I like it. Yeah.
yeah, and I do believe
He was on a spiritual crusade, right?
that's right, because he does see the Greek word or are so materialistic. That's why he set up his mission, okay, to bring the revolution to the world. Okay. So he's minority. Okay. And but unfortunately, today we read him as majority thinking. We may think all the big Greek people, they all believe form, they all believe we are in the cave and we need to. No, they probably don't think that. They probably very materialistic. You know, that's why.
That's a great point, except that I want to make the counter argument.
Okay, go ahead.
When I look at Athens, I look at it as a conservative religious community that had a lot of problems with radical thinkers. First of all, they threatened to kill Anaxagoras, and he only got out by the skin of his teeth because Pericles helped him. Then they threatened to kill Socrates because of his unorthodox ideas, and they actually did it. And there are many other examples of what Aristotle had to flee because they were threatening to kill him. So if you were a philosopher in Athens, you lived dangerously.
Well, I
This
just
shows a
probably
very conservative, pious community.
I no, I think it's just the opposite. Okay, that shows how free they are because Aristotle is able to escape, and Anaxagoras is going to escape. Socrates could be able to escape, but he refused. That's why he became famous.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
so there's no atrocity like today's China or other country Okay, because that's just exactly show how free they are. Okay.
Okay, that's a good point. I want to say something else about this last paragraph. This is a fascinating word that he used, which is that the secondary qualities are known to us only through convention. Very interesting. And McGill says probably means subjective opposed to
Mhm.
objective. But that's not what convention means. And it's fascinating to try to understand why he chose that word, convention, to talk about secondary qualities, because we would not look at secondary
Yeah,
qualities
that's exactly my
today.
question. Yeah, what's your answer?
My answer is that there is a similarity between conventional thought and secondary qualities because neither of them have an objective reality in the world. And so, therefore, you can look at convention as a kind of
Subjective.
metaphor or slipshod reasoning on his part. He noticed the similarities, and that was as good as he could do.
Okay, so
It's still interesting, though, to
yeah,
to
it's yeah. Uh,
because okay, let me say something else about that. Protagoras
convention?
was Protagoras was, of course, did not believe that there were any sense a set of absolute morals. He believed morals were all relative and that they were all based on convention. So here in this discussion of secondary qualities and the role that convention plays, you can really see the influence on Protagoras.
Yeah,
So this has enormous consequences, I think, to philosophy. And let me say something about Protagoras and Gorgias. There's been a revival of interest in them lately, especially among the postmodernists like Derrida. And there is kind of a great new respect in the 20th century, not to say even the 21st, for the sophists, believing that they had a mature philosophy that should be respected. And I think there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of merit in that view. Their view is the view of the sophists, who were essentially, relativistic without being nihilists, is probably most similar to the views that I have. And um, we get a very distorted picture of their philosophy through Plato, who hated them and was fighting against them, and Aristotle and these other philosophers, the Christians, But it's time to reassess their philosophy and talk about the importance of conventions and secondary qualities and how they work their ethics with their epistemology and everything. I think that it's worth studying them.
yeah, I agree with you. I just back to what my idea about. I think Plato has a mission to against of
Right,
not only the Democritus, also against the sophists like
right.
Pythagoras.
Yeah.
Uh, Suppose we should put Democritus and Pythagoras in the same way, same heavy, okay, as Plato and Aristotle. Let's put it this way, So they should
Yeah,
be
I'd like to do
at
that.
two sides of the scale. Okay, not
Yeah, I like
we
it.
are totally focused on one side, then the other side. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
and
exactly.
in the modern sense, okay, especially if you believe democratic political system, you should study more on Democritus and
Right. Look at Democritus.
Pythagoras. Yeah, so
Exactly.
rather than Plato and Aristotle. So
Exactly. That's so
that's
true.
like paragraph want to read the humanity reading list from Columbia University. Uh, they should read more.
They should read Democritus more than
Yeah,
Plato.
that's right. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
at least so.
exactly.
Okay, next.
There are two forms of knowledge, one genuine, one obscure. Of the obscure sort are all these: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. The genuine is distinguished from this. Whatever the obscure cannot sense any farther into the minute by seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting or touching, but it is necessary to pursue the investigation more finely, then the genuine, which has a finer organ of knowing, comes up. The organ of genuine knowledge would seem to be the pure reason that led Democritus to deduce the atomic nature of matter. But Democritus was worried, as well he might have been, about the obscure. He portrayed the senses speaking thus to the mind: wretched mind, getting from us your confidences, you cast us down. That is your own downfall. For the information on which even the atomic theory is based is, after all, derived ultimately from observation through the senses.
So obscure knowledge and the genuine knowledge. That's very enlightenment kind of thinking. Okay. Sensation and the reason, two sources of knowledge. Okay. I think Humean concept. Okay.
Well, the person I thought of was the people I thought of were Parmenides and Plato. Remember that in Plato's divided line, he divides knowledge as being above the line, and then below the line is belief and opinion, which are based on the senses.
Yeah.
Clear division between knowledge which is uncertain and imprecise and true knowledge which comes from logical deduction.
Yeah, they all have a different
And
opinion.
Parmenides argued the same thing. He even used the same words that Plato used. He
Well,
used the word belief and opinion versus knowledge.
I think this dichotomy exists in all Western philosophers. Okay, just depend on which one you want to focus, which one you believe is important. Okay, so uh, that's become the fun.
I don't know about that because,
Well, everybody talk about this so
well,
too, so
look, I'm not
no
sure if
one can
everybody
ignore it.
does.
I mean,
I'm not sure if everybody does.
I think
Plato
everybody
taught,
believe it.
I used to read about it, in tech, when I was reading Plato in the past,
Mhm.
and I would learn that, I had the impression that Plato invented the idea.
No, I
And
think
then I read Parmenides, and I realized that Parmenides had the same idea. And I go,
yeah,
wow.
Democritus also have the same.
And
Democritus.
Democritus had the same idea, but Democritus is essentially a Parmenidean. Although, you know, he
Well,
he
yeah,
he
but
draws a lot of his philosophy from Parmenides.
you look at further future, okay, in the Enlightenment period of time, the European philosophers they all have this kind of dichotomy. Okay,
Yeah.
some people will say, okay, sensation is the only truth. Okay, some people will say, no, 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 let's forget about
Well,
sensation.
the rationalist versus the
Yeah,
empiricist, right?
yeah, I think that's the foundation of that.
But that would, required a lot of effort to construct that model of rationalism and empiricism. So what did they do? Did they forget about it for 1,000 years?
That's all Plato's fault because
That's right, because
that's all Plato's fault.
he was so critical of obscure knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the uh, Kant has a good Kant talk about uh, the dove will believe that if there's no air, he will fly much easier. Okay, and he used this one to criticize Plato, okay, because sensation give you obscure idea, and you abandon sensation totally, just like the dove will say, if there's no air, I can fly much easier. And that's his.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. That's good.
When Kant want to be funny, he's very fun.
That's a good one. I like it.
This one, right?
If reality consists of matter with only its primary qualities, what kind of reality do sensation and thought and consciousness in general have? This problem besets all forms of materialism and is often allegedly, wrongly, to be fatal to it as a worldview. Democritus spent much effort in trying to account for sensation on atomic principles. Thus, he claimed that sour fluids consist of angular and twisted atoms, while honey is made of rounded rather than large ones. This was, of course, inconsistent with his claim that tastes are subjective effects. He could have patched up the account to some extent by considering not only the atomic constitution of the food, but also that of the tongue which interacts with it. But there is no evidence that he did so. Perhaps it was despair at this problem that led him to exclaim, "In reality, we know nothing, for truth is in a depth."
Actually, I think that his explanation of like angular atom make you feel sour, spicy. I think that's a pretty
I like
consistent.
it
I think that's a good explanation. Why McGill
too.
complained? Why McGill complained? So I think that's that's pretty good one.
Because there's a couple of reasons why he complains. I agree, I like it too.
Yeah.
But first of all, he doesn't really explain how sensation works by simply explaining atoms. And you know who does a better job of explaining sensation? Two people, Anaxagoras and Empedocles, who were writing just a little bit previously. Now, if you recall, Anaxagoras argues that sensation comes from an irritation, that
Oh,
there is the external substance that interacts with the internal, and because it's different, there's a sensation. And Empedocles offers just the exact opposite, says that like stimulates like. So McGill might have believed that these philosophers had a more sophisticated explanation of sensation, because you can't simply argue that there are sensations without talking about the way that the body and mind interact with, the different
well,
objects.
I think the McGill forget one thing. Your body also create by also is a consist it's a your body also built by atom. Okay, so with a different shape. So I think it's already
Yeah.
explained that. Just okay. So let's go to next one.
Materialists should say that sensations are not things at all, but Democritus held that they are illusory things. This, at any rate, is the impression we get from ancient discussions of his theory of knowledge. It may be mistaken, for the accounts all come from hostile critics who may well have misunderstood or misrepresented the great Abderite.
So here is a question. How I think that's really a challenge for the materialistic for the materialist.
Right, exactly. It's
Materialist.
a challenge to materialists.
Sensation, consciousness, and the thought, right? How does this one come from, right? So
Exactly.
just like all the idealists, they have the problem to explain the existence of the external world. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the difficulty, and it's a good challenge. And it is the challenge that still upsets a lot of people who argue that materialism is self-contradictory and completely unconvincing because it doesn't explain how we can have pictures and sensations in the mind. One
Yeah,
explanation,
that,
one answer is that we can't understand how the pictures are formed and we can't understand what the pictures are made of, but we're going to describe it as an epiphenomenon, which means that when particles and their forces all get together in the brain, they create something that we can't understand, but which does exist.
well, remember the person you guys.
That's my solution, by the way.
Yeah, man, no. But do you remember the person you guys all hate? Gilbert Ryle, which I like a lot. Okay, so
Yeah, because he doesn't even allow that there could be pictures in the mind.
that's right. So but there's no
But there
mind.
are pictures in the mind. We
Hold
all
on, no,
feel
no, no,
pictures
no.
in the mind.
No, you don't have to ignore it because everything is created by the behavior from outside world. There's no mind.
Created, yes, but
So I think
you
I'm not
can't
going to.
ignore it.
I'm not going to go further argument. I will say Aristotle is right about our brain is just a cooling mechanism. That's what I start to believe because our brain function is just a cooling system to make our behavior right. Okay, so let's put it straight. So,
Okay, that
okay,
makes
I know
sense.
you are. I know nobody agree, but I I I I will work in on this.
Well, the brain does, partly is a cooling.
Just cooling,
It's
nothing
responsible
else.
for
No picture,
homeostasis.
no picture, nothing. Just cooling. That's I'm
Yeah,
just.
okay, that's
You think
novel.
with your muscle, your
That's
hand.
original. I
Yeah.
know I understand that theory. You've talked about it before, and
Yeah. So
there's an argument for it.
yeah, you thinking reason with your tongue and with your hand, with your leg, and the brain just facilitate. Okay, make it work better.
I'll tell you my view, which is that there are 7 ways that the brain can operate. It can operate through sensation, it can operate through cognition. One of the ways that I consider it operates is the way you described.
Okay.
So when you say this is the brain, I'm not going to disagree with it because I think it's important to look at that aspect of the brain. The body, separate from the brain, simply as a part of our reactivity and the way that the body thinks, is another way to describe a portion of brain activity. So you see, I'm not gonna disagree with you on that because I included in my system.
Yeah, but you will disagree. That's
I
the
disagree that
only
that's the
function.
only function or way that the brain operates. So we're a little slightly different on that.
Okay, great. Okay, go ahead. Unlike,
Unlike most Greek philosophers, Democritus was a partisan of democracy. He said poverty in a democracy is as much preferable to so-called prosperity in an autocracy as freedom is to slavery. By democracy, he meant a constitutional government directed by public-spirited, intelligent men in the interests of all citizens.
I think that's important, and I don't see. I think he is not a democracy, not support democracy in our sense. Okay,
Yeah, he supports a constitutional republic.
he is talking about an
He's just against the
efficient.
tyrants. That's all. Tyrants and all.
I think here. I'm not sure democracy is the right word. I'm not sure it's in his original. He write the democracy. Well, he said democracy in his.
No, I think that he probably did because there
Yeah,
was a
he
kind of
used
an
the.
overlap. From Aristotle that he describes good democracy, which is a constitutional republic, and bad democracy, which is ruled by the mob. So there was kind of an overlap in people's mind
Yeah,
that
I think
democracy simply means participation on some level by the people, by everybody.
Yeah, and he want to, I think Democritus want to, I think his focus probably not on democracy by the people side, are
I
more by
agree.
law. Okay, because I do think he probably looking for bring the nature law to the social law. Okay, I think that's why he tried to,
Wow.
because he think about, because I think about, he probably, if because I'm reconstruct his metaphysics. Okay,
Sure.
so he probably thinking about this entire world is mechanistic. Okay, so if it
Right.
is why your society should be a machine, a big machine. Okay,
Right.
so in this big machine, there's a two way to construct this machine. One is communist type of the Stalian type, right? You have the big guy, and then you decide to have every machine. Another way is more on the democracy, okay, democratic way of building this machine. But anyway, he probably plays more on the functional, efficient machine more than the collectively work by people, something like this. Yeah. Or
Well,
well representative. I think today's democracy are more on the representative government, and then people's voice. I think is more important. Yeah.
well, a representative is what a republic is.
Is that modern?
No, that's all the way back from, no, that's back to the Greeks, and especially with the Romans who elected a Senate. They
Do they
were
call
that's a
themselves
republic.
republic?
The Rome is a republic because the people didn't make the laws. The people elected people to make laws, the Senate. So that's the difference between a republic and a democracy.
I think Roman call themselves a republic instead
Yeah,
of,
they call it with quite accurately,
well,
because
republic
they had
means
people who were elected to make the laws.
I think republic means that's a two word, right? That's a republic, right? That's the public affair, public thing. So it lost the flavor of democracy.
Uh,
From people to,
Republic,
okay, democracy and the republic.
we could talk about that for a long amount, but I don't
Okay.
want to get into that.
Okay, that's don't
But
get
what I
this.
do want to get into is
No,
something else,
yeah. No, nothing else.
which
Because,
is that I want to give my explanation of why I think Democritus was a Democrat.
yeah, go ahead.
I don't analyze it metaphysically like you do.
Yes, go
I
ahead.
analyze it historically. This was a period in Greek history when Pericles was the ruler, and Pericles was instituting his ideals of democratic republic. And at this time, to be a Democrat was to be not a radical, but a progressive who was arguing for the rule of law of Pericles, who was a huge success. And I think later years after Pericles, after, during the years of the Peloponnesian War, when Plato was writing, and during the tyranny of the 30 oligarchs and everything, people had soured on democracy, because I think democracy did fall apart in Athens and it turned into something horrible. So these were the first years of democracy. Some people say they were the first. It wasn't a pure democracy in all cases. It was a democratic republic. It was a polity, a combination of constitution and elected leaders and everything. But these were the first years when there was such hope for what democracy could do. And I look at Democritus as being one of those people who looked at it as a kind of a reform government that would, and under Pericles, it was turning out to be so positive. And so that may explain some of the differences between him and Plato.
I think that make more sense,
That's a historical analysis.
Yeah, I think this analysis could be
You have to
more.
remember the time and how
Yeah, because so
really
you
what a
said
great statesman Pericles was.
so
He
during
made
that
it
time,
work.
during his time, that democracy is a new idea.
Right.
Okay, I got you. I think I will agree with you on that. And probably he already faced at least his teacher faced the Persian. Okay. Uh,
Yeah, that happened all the way
higher.
back in 500.
Yeah, there's
And
a
they'd already defeated the Persians and they were in their
yeah,
glory.
and the Persian always their threat. And then I
And
think
the Persians, of course, were totalitarian. And
yeah.
they knew the Persians were totalitarian.
Yes,
They were
and
very
then
proud of their Athenian democracy.
so I think that's very similar to today's situation. All human situation, you face a strong enemy. There's a two choice, right? One, we can learn from our enemy. They do totalitarian. If they do great, then we learn from them. Another way is we do totally opposite from them. So I think that's
Exactly.
okay. So next.
Democritus was one of the most prolific authors of antiquity, having written, we are told, more than 60 works. All have perished. The fragments that remain fill about 10 pages of ordinary print, of which 8 are concerned with ethics, politics, education, and child rearing. Democritus thought it a risky and thankless business to have children. Many of the ethical reflections are unbearably platitudinous. In good fortune, it is easy to find a friend. In misfortune, hardest of all. Others are shrewd and worldly wise. If you cannot understand the compliments, conclude that you are being flattered. The general tenor of the maxims is advocacy of cheerfulness, that is, of prudence, contentment with what one has, not worrying too much. He who would be cheerful must not busy himself with many things, either by himself or in company, and whatever he busies himself with, he should not choose what is beyond his own power and nature. But he should be so on his guard that when a stroke of fortune tempts him to excess, he puts it aside and does not grasp at what is beyond his powers. For being well filled is better than being stuffed. There are some fragments, however, that rise quite above this pedestrian level, embodying, in fact, teachings often credited to others and used unfairly to belabor crude materialism. And let me just read these, okay?
Yeah.
Refrain from wrongdoing, not from fear, but from duty. The doer of injustice is unhappier than the sufferer. Goodness is not merely in refraining from being unjust, but in not even wishing to be. The cause of error is ignorance of the better.
Okay, so I wish we McGill will include more on this ethical part or political part uh, on this, right?
Yeah, I
So
know what you mean.
yeah, so for example, I make a list. For example, he talk about for small appetites make poverty equivalent to wealth. Okay, that's why I call him Epicureanism before
That
Epicurus.
is so similar. It's so
Yeah.
interesting.
And the one thing is very interesting for you and me. The old man has been young, but the young man cannot know if he will reach the old age. So
That's very wise.
who is better, right? So courage is beginning of action, but fortune is the arbitrator of the goal. Okay, arbiter. Justice is to do what should be done. Injustice is to fail to do what should be done. Uh, he talked about democracy. He talked about you should, oh, life without festival is a long road without an inn. Okay. That is a lot of good,
A lot of good,
yeah.
memorable quotes. Yeah.
Okay, the hope of the educated are better than the wealth of the ignorant. Education is an ornament for the prosperous, a refugee for unfortunate. I think he has a very good speech is a shadow of action. Okay. And he also talk about we are pupils of animal. We learn how to sing from birds. We learn how to spinning, mending from spider. Okay. So I think he has a lot of great idea. For
Those are
example,
brilliant. I love those.
like you should not have the children, and if you want to have children, you should adopt your friend's children because you can choose the one you like. And then
Great.
if you have a good son, if you marry your daughter well, that means you gain a son. If you marry badly, that means you lose a daughter. So so I think he has a lot, and I collect all his
He was a genius. He was a genius.
no, I collected the fragment. I read the fragment, but very few is talking about his atomic theory. Most are about reasons, like
Yeah.
many who have not learned the reason, not according. I'm not sure why you talk about this. Okay, and the medicine here, disease of the body. Wisdom free the soul from passion. I think it's a lot of just like reading the
Those are
uh
brilliant.
uh what's that? Heraclitus. It's a lot of interesting idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Very similar. You're right.
Another also important idea. A woman is far sharper than a man in in evil thought.
I don't get it. I didn't quite hear it.
A man
A woman is a better shopper than a man?
in the evil thought. Malay, how does that? Let me check. Okay, he said, okay, let me get the sentence. Oh, okay. A woman is far sharper than a man in Malay thought.
In what thought?
Malay, the bad.
Malign. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Woman is better in slandering, I believe he said. Okay. So
A woman is better in what?
is slandering people, I
Oh, in
believe.
slandering. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And
the
those are
sharp.
great. Yeah.
I think he has a lot of.
Nietzsche was very influenced by a certain French philosopher who wrote a whole book of aphorisms. And Nietzsche always wanted to write a book of aphorisms on his own. And he
Yeah,
did. It's not one of his more famous books, but I can really understand how you could appreciate the impact and the genius that writing these types of aphorisms requires. I
but
really have
I'm
an
not sure.
appreciation for them.
I'm not sure Democritus is writing aphorism on purpose. It could be just a collection of fragment, right?
Mm, yeah,
That's what I'm thinking,
that's
And
possible. Yeah.
then, oh, one thing I forget to talk about is about Plato's Timaeus. In Plato's Timaeus, he talking about the fire, air, water, and the earth. They all construct by different triangle. Okay. So I do see this one
How
also
did you
have,
know about that? I was going to mention that myself.
oh,
You know,
really?
he has a very similar picture of the way that these types of different elements affect us according to their shape. And I just thought, man, he
Okay.
stole this.
Yeah. That's the thing I see the
Yeah, he
similarity.
talks about fire as having a certain sharp shape,
Yeah.
and so on. I was really struck by it when I read the Timaeus a long time ago in college. But now I understand that the more I read about the pre-Socratics, the more I realize Plato just took everything from everyone else.
Yeah, he just there's many ideas of Plato because we tend to read Plato as a beginning, but actually we constantly we forget
That's
before
right.
Plato and Socrates they already have a very rich culture over there. Probably a better word is the Greeks. Okay, the Greek guess have every possible guess on everything. So
Every possible what?
they guess everything, right? They have all
Oh,
kinds.
every possible guess. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
okay, so uh, done for today.
yeah.
Great.